So we push into April of 16, and the English are trying to move some of their non-English troops, the Canadians, the Australians, New Zealand, whatever, into place for the planned assault on this hex. They would have liked to have launched it this turn. In fact, they may just do it. They can't get all their artillery into place, etc. But counting a big French artillery assault, they've got a slight advantage right now. And with the shifting of forces, it becomes apparent. So I think I'm going to make that attack, because otherwise the Germans will reinforce that sector. In that attack, they rolled a big 5, almost knocked them out. They're down to 2 German strength points there, but they don't have to retreat. They've got fortification. They've got the entrenchments there. They did 19 points of damage. This was a weak spot on the line, especially given that it's surrounded by 3 things. It actually was weaker in some of the areas that were not surrounded by 3 things. And it was clearly the place to hit. But hitting it meant the French had to expend, not just for the troops here though, but because of all these artillery I had. That upped my odds a great deal of actually getting the breakthrough, making it possible. This was about the only place I could get a breakthrough with the Allies here against the Germans. It didn't quite happen. I needed a somewhat better die roll, just a 6 instead of a 5. If I could have gotten more English troops, the additional guns and etc., it would have improved the odds significantly. But once you call attention to a weak spot, you better hit it. You really better hit it. In a vassal game, you probably don't have this situation, but if you were playing live, you start paying a lot of attention to an area. Your opponent starts saying, well, are you assembling for that? Am I going to have to defend that area a little more carefully? So I don't feel like in the board game that you would ever be in this situation where you wouldn't notice that your opponent is kind of looking to a certain location. So you kind of have to make that attack when it hits. The attack's main purpose was to do damage to the British because they have a lot of replacement points, especially the Canadians needed to get reduced. They had some supply points, but they're really not... what am I at here? 30. There should be another British kicking around, I think. Oh, 30, 40, 41. They can retain that for... That's not an issue. So the big issue here was trying to create that. Now, if the Germans don't fill this gap, the English will hit it again. Or if they have to strip something in the line, the English will take an opportunity. But they're not in some kind of real need to make the attack here. Germans opened up another weak spot over here, strengthening this location. This one became a little weaker. And this had been where the Brits were considering attacking anyway. There were only 12 strength points there. They hit it. They hit it hard, 116 points. French supplies, because of their artillery supply and English supplies, are beginning to look a little weak here, as though they can't really continue this offensive. Paying for that kind of attack, especially with it being artillery heavy, is very, very high cost. They had a very good chance of a breakthrough there, and rolled really crappy, I think, on one. Nah, it couldn't have been. Yeah, so they were at -3. They rolled a 4 or something because they ended up with a 1 on the table. But they ended up 1 point away from destroying the Germans again. You know, so it was a good attack with a good chance of some sort of success. But they're not achieving the breakthroughs. They're not achieving the damage that they need to. They're doing additional damage over what the Germans are taking. Attacks seem to always be better on the attritional side in this game, which feels a little funny to me. But when you look at the records, actually, the truth of the matter is those big battles, when you count them all up, quite often the first strike was very high in casualties for the enemy, and quite often the overall results were pretty much even, actually. Having to do, you know, and we're talking month-long battles with counterattacks going back and forth. Quite often the actual strike was fairly heavy, so I don't know. I'm not sure it's taking into account everything, like determined resistance after a while or whatever, but it does seem to hit that initial blow correctly. And given the philosophy of the game that you can shift at any point, that you don't have to just keep pouring into the same sector, I'm not sure how else to represent it. Anyway, that's what we got away with there. Everything fairly quiet except the English shifted their assault again to here. Another fairly good attack. But at this point the English are really just wasting supplies. And they're low enough that they've got to stop. They're down under 10 supplies at this point. This one probably couldn't have broken through very easily, and they rolled poorly enough that it didn't. They actually got a bad mix where the Germans did almost as much damage as they did. It's weakening the German line. It has the Germans kind of scrambling in their head, but they're not spending a lot of supplies, so eventually they're going to have to launch an offensive too. As long as you're getting attacked in weak points, you don't have enough units to throw supplies in. So you take a lot of casualties, but you don't get rid of the thing that you need to get rid of in order to avoid losing the game. And the front's quieted down again. Out of supplies with the English and French. You know, it just doesn't feel like... One side of this works very well. The troop strengths are being maintained. The armies are really filled up on the front in a way that, say, La Grande Guerre doesn't manage. But the length of the offensives is usually maybe 2 weeks at the longest that I've seen so far. This does not reflect what I expect at all historically. The supplies don't last long enough to continue an offensive. The willpower doesn't last long enough. Now, I don't know, maybe it would make more sense to continue these offensives beyond that, but to tell you the truth, the impetus for making these offensives, in my game at least, has been I need to spend supply. And as your supply gets low and you don't know where your opponent's at, if you start making out of supply attacks, first of all, they're not going to succeed unless your opponent's out of supply. And secondly, if your opponent's not out of supply and he either makes an attack that you can't supply, or even weirder, you start making attacks without supply, he knows you're weak, and he can start picking your weaker points and just blasting them away in a manner that would cause the front to collapse. So, as far as I'm concerned, you have to halt these offensives at this early date, and it doesn't feel accurate. Now, the offensives in La Grande Guerre tend to grind down the armies to such a point. The Russian army seems about right in that game, but the French, and even most especially the German army, never really recovers to the point where you even can feel like you can really make an offensive, but you have to. It's an odd... both games, I think, fail to actually capture the feel of the era properly. I'm not sure. We'll see. Well, the Germans have too much supply, so they launched a big 3-hex attack, but not a lot of supply got burned in it, honestly. They're going to have to do another attack, at least one more, by the end of this month. They did some damage, but took more themselves, and this is really an unpleasant situation to get into, where you have a lot of supplies, the enemy's not reacting, isn't attacking in any sense, so you're not going to burn any, and you don't have a good grasp, a good place to hit. This was the most attractive location. They knew they couldn't break through it, not with the -2. They knew they were going to take losses with the +2 coming against them, and it ended up being pretty unpleasant for them. And basically the current effect of that attack that was made against the French here, a lot more troops thrown into this salient, make it harder to cut in. The way that was managed was the French lost another hex in Paris. The Brits took over another hex over, for the most part. I think there's one French unit in there. But just, shifting that British line. There's more British troops in the line now, so I can afford that, and getting an extra stack really shifting it all the way down the line. It trickled down a little bit. Certainly it didn't all make it completely down there, but we got a much more powerful defense in that area. And the Brits can hold their line. I don't view the Allies as having supplies in the near future. So they're kind of saying, well, we don't really need to have the offensive capability that, say, the Brits or the Brits and French combined had in this salient. It's more important to prevent the Germans from being able to get a breakthrough. The Germans are going to have to make another attack. Best location for a German blow is here. I'm still worried that I'm going to be over. I don't want to keep recalculating each time. I don't want to do another assault this round. But anyway, it went poorly for the Germans. And then the French kind of evened up their lines more. No biggie there. And, well, we'll move into that next month. I don't know, I guess I had to load this one up. I hate putting so many videos out, but it's close to long enough. Alright, so that's the end of April, and we slide into May. I got all kind of bookkeeping type crap to do in between months.